She thought the worst was finding out her husband had a mistress. But it wasn't. It was hearing him say, "Didn't your mom tolerate it too?" Now, after walking away from the life she built for him, she's in Paris. But just when she starts breathing again, her past shows up with a final plea. My name is Avery Collins, and for a while I genuinely believed I had it all. I'd been married to Daniel Carter for 3 years. The world saw us as the perfect couple. Him, the charismatic investment strategist with a timeless smile. Me, the silent strength behind his shine, always poised and supportive. To outsiders we were enviable. Daniel gave me affection, showered me with gifts, and called me his everything. At least that's what I believed. One rainy afternoon I was cleaning the upstairs study, something I rarely did myself anymore. It was one of those impulsive moments. The villa was quiet, Daniel was on a business trip, and I was bored enough to dust the mahogany shelves myself. That's when I found the envelope. Tucked inside the back of the safe, beneath old tax records, was a neatly typed agreement. Dated, signed, and notarized. A marriage contract. His name was right there. Daniel Carter. Her name, Brook, a name I'd never heard before. It detailed monthly payments, gifts, allowances, and absurd clauses about discretion and preferred appearance. The blood drained from my face. I sat on the edge of the leather armchair, clutching the paper in my hands, and stared at the wall for what must have been an hour. My brain didn't process what my eyes saw. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the way he had made a fool of me so effortlessly while claiming to love me. When Daniel returned that evening, I didn't wait. I walked into the kitchen, held the document out, and asked one question. "What is this?" He glanced at the paper, blinked once, and then rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting," he said calmly, setting down his keys. "Didn't your dad cheat too? Your mom tolerated it. I'm just having some fun. Why can't you?" That was the moment something in me broke. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just looked at him, this man who had vowed to protect me, and realized I didn't know him at all. That night I logged into the account he'd opened under my name. I transferred the money from the house sale he had put in my trust, liquidated the car under my name. For 3 days Daniel didn't come home. I didn't call him. I didn't ask where he was like I used to. I no longer needed to. I'd stopped trying. On the 4th morning he returned. I hadn't slept much. My body was aching, especially after knowing I was pregnant. I hadn't told him about, not after that argument. He didn't deserve to know. I lay still in bed as I heard the front door unlock. Footsteps padded across the marble tiles, climbed the stairs, and entered the master bedroom. Then the mattress dipped beside me. Daniel's warm chest pressed against my back like it used to. My body stiffened instantly. What once made me feel safe now filled me with resistance. I shifted away, but he pulled me closer. "Why are you so cold?" he whispered. I laughed bitterly under my breath. "I'm sleeping in the guest room." His face turned stormy in an instant. "When will you finally grow up?" he snapped. "Do you have to throw a tantrum like a child?" My chest ached, not from sorrow but from the bitter irony of it all. I turned to him, calm as ice. "So in your eyes, I'm the one making a fuss?" He didn't answer. Just clenched his jaw and said nothing. His silence confirmed it. "We can't even stand each other anymore," I said. "Pick a day. Let's go to the civil office. Let's get divorced." His expression darkened. He stood and walked over, standing above me with a face I didn't recognize anymore. "She gives me freshness, Avery. You've become cold. And this is just a contract. Once it is over, I'll get rid of her. You're the one who matters." It stunned me, not the betrayal but how shamelessly he could package it in false affection. "So women are just disposable to you," I whispered. "New toys when you're bored. Is that how you saw me? We've been married 4 years. Have I ever treated you badly?" He snapped. "Why can't you just turn a blind eye like everyone else? Like my mother?" I bit back. Who spent her entire life covering up for my father's cheating until it destroyed her from the inside out. His jaw twitched, but I didn't let him speak. "I'm not her. I don't tolerate betrayal. I won't stay where I'm disrespected." He stepped closer, anger simmering behind his eyes. "So what, you'll go find your own freshness now?" I smiled coldly. "Even you can't accept that, Daniel. So why expect it from me?" He grabbed my wrist then tightly. My breath hitched from the sudden pressure. "You dare," he whispered. I didn't flinch. "Let go." or I'll call the police before I call my lawyer." He stared at me long and hard. Then finally let go, spun around and slammed the door. I sat back down on the bed. Surrounded by the same room where we once laughed. Where he proposed. Where we thought we'd build a family. The same room where my heart had just quietly crumbled to dust. I sat there in silence, surrounded by the echo of a slammed door and a silence far louder than any screaming match. I looked around the room we once called ours. The gold-framed wedding photo still hung crooked on the wall. His blazer was draped over the chair like a ghost refusing to leave. The room felt haunted. By what we once were. By what I once believed. Earlier that year my father, once the man I thought defined stability, had been caught in an affair. His mistress had marched into our family home, pregnant, loud, and unapologetic. She screamed, cursed, and demanded that my mother leave. And my father didn't deny it. In fact, he stood between her and my mother, not to protect my mom but to defend the other woman. He even hit her. The day that happened, I'd collapsed in Daniel's arms, inconsolable. And he held me like I was something precious. "I'm here," he had whispered. "Don't be afraid. I'm nothing like him." The irony now twisted in my gut like a knife. Daniel had given me that very sense of security I had craved. He'd been consistent. He called. He came home. He told me he loved me, even showed it in his own quiet way. But behind all that steadiness was a carefully hidden second life. A girl 3 years younger than me. A mistress he kept tucked away in a luxury condo I'd probably paid for with my family's inheritance. If I hadn't cleaned that damn study, would I have ever known? The pain in my lower abdomen throbbed suddenly, sharp and searing. I doubled over slightly, clutching my side. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. For a moment I hesitated, and then instinct took over. I dialed Daniel's number. 1 ring. 2 rings. Then a cold automated voice. "The number you've dialed is unavailable." I didn't even bother trying again. I gritted my teeth and dialed 911. I must have passed out on the floor. When I opened my eyes, the harsh white of hospital lighting made me flinch. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled my nose. My head pounded. And beside my bed, sat Daniel. Arms crossed. Face like thunder. He didn't look concerned. He looked furious. "You aborted our child," he said, voice low, sharp. My throat was dry. My body heavy. But I still managed to say, "Yeah." "What gave you the right to do that?" he growled. That was Rich, he of all people asking about rights. "In 4 years of marriage you never once brought up wanting kids," I said quietly. "Even when your mother pushed you always said, 'We're still young. No rush.' So I assumed you didn't want them." "You should have told me," he spat. I looked him straight in the eye. "Why? So you could lecture me about how I ruined your future? You already sold your loyalty to another woman, Daniel. Why would I want to tie myself to you forever with a child?" He kicked the chair beside him so hard it crashed across the room. I flinched. He clapped slowly, mockingly. "Wow. You really are something else." "I am," I replied. "I just wish I'd realized it sooner." He had nothing more to say. Eventually he left the room. Didn't even look back. After I was discharged, I moved in with Harper, my best friend since college. She had a cozy 2-bedroom apartment downtown and a tendency to always save people from themselves, even if they didn't ask. When I told her everything, she went silent. Then finally said, "A man whose heart changes is like spoiled milk. Don't keep sniffing it hoping it'll get better." I laughed for the first time in days. Harper made up the spare room, stocked the fridge, and put my name on the lease the very next day. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "In case that maniac comes looking for you," she replied, sipping wine. "Legal protection. He steps in here, I can have him removed with a court order." The next morning I returned to the villa. Not to reconcile. To collect and cleanse. I walked through the marble halls like a stranger in a museum of someone else's life. The closets were still filled with luxury, gowns with tags still on, heels I hadn't worn, purses that cost more than I ever admitted. All gifts from Daniel. Each one a carefully placed illusion of affection. I sorted everything into boxes. Donate, sell, burn. Then I opened the drawer beside the bed. And found the letters. Pink envelopes, dozens of them. Daniel's handwriting. His words. His love. One for our first anniversary. One for my birthday. One after our first fight. My hands trembled as I held them. The memories they carried tried to fight their way back into my heart. I didn't let them. I walked outside to the rose garden I had planted myself and pulled out a lighter. As flames devoured the paper, a sharp wind swept through the yard. Mrs. Jensen, our housekeeper, rushed out. "Miss Collins, what are you doing?" "Removing things that no longer serve me," I said calmly. "But the roses," she cried, pointing at the scorched earth. "Let them burn too." By nightfall I had hired a cleaning crew to scrub every trace of me from that house. Daniel's response? "Let her do whatever she wants," he said on the phone. "You don't need to update me." I was standing right there when I heard it. That was the final nail in the coffin. That week, Daniel began bringing his mistress, Brook, to every event I once attended. He paraded her through hotel lobbies, fundraisers, dinner galas like she was some prize he'd earned. But the whispers began too. People noticed my absence. They asked questions. Harper filled me in. Meanwhile, I started listing my handbags online. "Are you really selling all of it?" Harper asked. "What else would I do with them?" I replied. "I'm not walking away from a 4-year marriage with nothing. And he's not going to hand me a dime without a legal fight." "You're colder than I expected," she said, a little impressed. "No," I replied. "I'm just done being foolish." The longer I stayed at Harper's, the easier it became to forget that I had ever been Mrs. Carter. Gone were the designer coats carefully chosen to impress Daniel's colleagues. Gone were the Monday night dinners with his parents where I'd smile through backhanded compliments and critique disguised as tradition. And gone, thankfully, were the days I'd wait up until midnight just to hear the front door click open. I had finally taken my silence back. And with it, my dignity. Each morning, I drank coffee from Harper's chipped mugs, scrolled through resale offers for my old designer bags, and let her fill me in on what people were whispering about Daniel's sudden switch of arm candy. The stories came from all angles. Our social circle, former coworkers, even the doorman at Daniel's old building. "He's spiraling," Harper reported one evening as we painted our nails on her balcony. "You're trending in whispers." "And Brooke? She's been showing up to those galas like she's auditioning for the life you already threw away." I didn't flinch. "You really don't care anymore, do you?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I used to." I decided to meet with a divorce lawyer the following week. "I want this to be clean, legal, and permanent," I told him. The lawyer, a sharp but weary-looking man named Mr. Penrose, nodded thoughtfully. "Do you have evidence of infidelity?" "I have the marriage contract with Daniel's signature," I said, placing the photocopy on his desk. He adjusted his glasses. "That'll help. But since there's no child and if he doesn't agree willingly, the court may push for mediation first." Mediation. I repeated, the word foul in my mouth. "I don't need a therapist. I need a signature. I'll send the first proposal. If he refuses, we'll escalate." That evening, I signed the divorce papers and left them in Penrose's hands. It was the cleanest way to say goodbye. Daniel didn't take it well. Within 2 hours of the document reaching his desk, my phone lit up with missed calls. 23 to be exact. When that failed, he turned up at Harper's door. I was watching a baking show, cradling a mug of hot tea when I heard the knock. Harper answered it with all the ferocity of a wolf guarding her cub. "You don't get to barge in anymore, Daniel," she snapped. "This isn't your home." "Where is she?" His voice was strained. Eyes darting around the apartment like a man possessed. "Tell her to come out. I need to talk to her." "She doesn't need to do anything," Harper said. "You gave up that right when you treated her like an option. Don't be ridiculous. She has nowhere else to go." That's when I stepped into the hallway. "You really think I'd come crawling back?" I said calmly. Daniel turned, eyes locking onto mine. His expression twisted, rage, desperation, confusion all flickering across his face. He took a step forward, but Harper stepped between us. "Touch her," she warned, "and I'll have you arrested." He showed up again the next day. This time he didn't come alone. Brook was with him. They arrived at Harper's building like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't just humiliated me in front of the city's most powerful circles. "Miss Collins," Brook began, her voice sugar-slick and shaking slightly. "I don't want to cause any trouble. I'm just here for support." "For support?" I echoed, amused. "You need to support him back to his car." Daniel's expression hardened. We're not leaving until you talk to me. I already did, I said. My answer is in those papers. Brooke looked from me to Daniel, then slowly stepped aside. Her eyes darted nervously as if she knew she wasn't supposed to be there anymore. Daniel waited until she was gone before he snapped. Why are you being so vindictive? This isn't who you are, Avery. You don't know who I am, I said. You knew the version of me that made herself small for your ego. His lips parted, but I kept going. You called my pain a tantrum. You used my mother's trauma as your excuse. You turned our marriage into a performance for the public while living like a bachelor behind closed doors. He said nothing. You don't get to cry about the consequences. Later that night, Harper found me burning what remained of my old life. Scraps of fabric from a dress I never finished, a photo of Daniel kissing my forehead at a New Year's party, and a half-written love letter he never got the chance to read. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, I said. A week later, Harper burst into my room holding her phone. You're not going to believe this. What? Brooke's gone. I raised a brow. She disappeared from all his events. Deleted her social media. A friend of mine said she was admitted to the hospital. Miscarriage. My breath caught. Miscarriage. Harper nodded. They said she might not be able to carry a child again. Complications. Scarring. Something serious. I said nothing. I didn't know what to feel. Daniel's been ghosting her, Harper added. Apparently told her she was never supposed to mean anything. He's unraveling. My stomach twisted, not from guilt but from the brutal clarity of it all. What Daniel did to her, he'd have done to me eventually. Only difference was I escaped. Daniel hadn't signed the papers. But it no longer mattered. 3 weeks had passed since I sent the documents through my lawyer. 3 weeks of silence, phone calls ignored and doorsteps avoided. And still his signature remained absent. His final act of control. But I had stopped waiting for it. I wasn't seeking freedom anymore. I was already living in it. And freedom didn't need his permission. According to Mr. Penrose, after 3 years of separation, I could file for divorce without his consent. That was enough for me. Time would do what dignity couldn't. In the meantime, I did what Daniel never expected. I disappeared. No more fixed addresses. I hopped from one hotel to the next every few days, avoiding patterns, refusing to be found. It wasn't fear. It was self-preservation. I knew him. I knew the desperation beneath his arrogance. Daniel Carter didn't like to lose what he once controlled. And I had become the only thing he couldn't buy back. I found something, Harper said one night, bursting into the suite like she owned it. A fashion design program in Paris. Elite. Invitation only. But they're doing a special selection this year. I blinked. Paris. You always said you wanted your own label. Here's your shot. No Daniel. No New York. No baggage. I didn't even hesitate. We submitted the application the next morning. I uploaded my latest sketches, designs I'd worked on quietly while Daniel was out entertaining clients, or delayed at work. My favorite pieces. Ones no one had ever seen but me. I sold the last of my bags and jewelry that same week. Enough to fund a new life. Then one morning, while sipping coffee on a cracked hotel balcony, my mother called. She sounded light. Almost happy. Avery, I was thinking of coming back next week. Do you want me to bring anything from California? I paused. The old me would have smiled, offered to pick her up at the airport, asked about her flight. But not this time. There's no need, I said, sharper than I meant to. She hesitated. Did I say something wrong? No. It's not you, I softened. Just, I'm leaving soon. There was silence. Then in a trembling voice she asked, Is this because of me and your father? No, I said. It's because of me and Daniel. Another silence. This one heavier. I stayed too long, she whispered. I thought love was about patience. But I confused endurance with worth. I closed my eyes. It's not too late for you either, Mom. You don't have to keep repeating the same script. She sniffled quietly. You're braver than I ever was. No, I said gently. I'm just tired of being scared. A few days later I received an email. I had been accepted. The Paris program. The golden ticket out. My name in bold letters next to a welcome banner. I read the message 3 times before I let myself smile. Finally, something was mine. Not borrowed. Not gifted. Not stolen through someone else's name. Harper and I celebrated by getting our nails done. Felt silly paint and polish after everything I'd been through. But when she laughed and clinked her glass of sparkling cider against mine, it felt like reclaiming something. You used to hate this stuff, she teased. I used to hate who I had to pretend to be, I said. Now, I just want to look how I feel, free. Then halfway through my manicure the salon door opened. Brook. Her skin was pale. Her posture slumped. Her eyes ringed with exhaustion. She wasn't wearing makeup. Not the confident, polished girl Daniel had paraded around. Just a woman who looked like she had been swallowed whole. She locked eyes with me and hesitated. Then quietly she walked over. Miss Collins, she said softly. Can we talk? I stared at her for a long moment. Harper scoffed behind me, already rolling her eyes. But something in Brook's voice, its emptiness, stopped me. I nodded once. 2 minutes. We walked to a small cafe around the corner and sat in silence for almost a minute before either of us spoke. I just had a miscarriage, she said. I blinked. She looked away. I thought, when he started taking me out in public, that he'd chosen me. But he told me I'd never be more than a placeholder. And when I got pregnant I thought maybe that would mean something. It was all unraveling now, her words, her illusion, her health. The doctor said my uterine lining's too thin, she added. I might never be able to carry again. I stared at her blankly. I was going to keep it, she whispered. But Daniel said he only wanted children with you. Not with me. He drove me to the clinic himself. Sat in the lobby while they took everything out of me. I inhaled sharply. Why are you telling me this? Asked finally. She looked down at her glass of water. Because I wanted you to know. That you weren't crazy. That he broke both of us. I said nothing. Most wives would have ruined me, she added. Gone after me. But you didn't. You ignored me. Gave me dignity even when I didn't deserve it. I wasn't protecting you, I said quietly. I was protecting myself. I left the cafe without looking back. That evening I called Mr. Penrose. He refused to sign again, I said flatly. There was a pause. Then we wait, he replied. 3 years of separation. That's all it takes. You've already started the clock. I thanked him and hung up. That night Harper and I celebrated anyway. Not because I had won. Not because he had lost. But because I had survived. That alone was enough. We drank wine. We watched a terrible romantic comedy. I laughed too hard at scenes that weren't funny. And for the first time in months I went to sleep without checking my phone. The next few days blurred into shopping sprees, long walks and unapologetic joy. I did everything I once held back from. I wore the red lipstick Daniel had called too bold. I ate street food in the rain without worrying about what anyone thought. I danced in the hotel room with Harper, barefoot and breathless. Revenge looks good on you, she said, watching me twirl. It's not revenge, I replied, still smiling. It's resurrection. So I stayed cautious. I rotated hotels every few nights, never posting my location, never using my real name at check-ins. Daniel hadn't come after me again, but I knew better than to assume he wouldn't. My visa for France was approved that week. And just like that, the final tether snapped. I booked a one-way flight. The day before I left, Harper handed me a tiny charm, gold oval with a small engraving on one side. A protection rune. Take this, she said, her voice tight. To keep you safe. To remind you that you're loved even when I'm not right next to you. I didn't say anything. He pulled me into a tight hug, already crying. Go. Start over. Come back when you're rich and famous and ready to design my wedding dress. It's a deal, I whispered, tears burning behind my eyes. The morning of my flight, the sun rose gently over the skyline. The air was light. Fresh. Like a new breath after too long underwater. Harper drove me to the airport. We didn't speak much. I think we both knew too many words would ruin the moment. As we pulled into departures, I reached for my bag and froze. A black car had been following us. Same one. For several blocks. Same license plate. My chest tightened. I turned sharply, but it was gone. Harper noticed the tension in my shoulders. What's wrong? Nothing, I said slowly. I'm probably imagining it. Still, I scanned the crowd as we walked in. But no sign of Daniel. Hours later, I landed in Paris. A different language. A different skyline. A different life. My new apartment wasn't glamorous. A modest one-bedroom with an old radiator and a squeaky door. But it was mine. Paid for with my designs. My decisions. My dignity. On the first night, I didn't unpack everything. I just opened my sketchbook, curled up on the mattress and began to draw. My hands moved on instinct. Sharp lines, layered fabrics, soft silhouettes rising from the page like dreams I'd finally given permission to breathe. And for the first time in a long time I felt hope. The call came just as I was folding freshly laundered fabric in my Paris apartment. Harper's name lit up on my phone. I answered with a lazy smile. But her voice was tight. "Avery, you need to sit down." Something in me stilled. "What is it?" "It's Daniel. He was in a car accident. Bad one. He was looking for you, drove into a divider." "I see." "They issued a critical notice during surgery." I stared at the thread in my hands, suddenly meaningless in its neat order. "He's alive." "Barely," she said. "His parents are trying to reach you. They know you're still his legal wife." I was quiet for a long moment. "Are you going to call them?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm not going back." "But his mother." "I'm not going back, Harper." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even feel guilt. I felt exhausted. Because even now, after all the wounds and all the silence, he still managed to pull my name back into his chaos. But what came next hit harder. That evening my phone rang again. The caller ID was blocked. I almost ignored it. Until I heard her voice. "Eleanor Carter. Daniel's mother." "You selfish little girl," she hissed before I could speak. "He went looking for you. You drove him to this." I held the phone away from my ear for a second, stunned. "What? You abandoned him, humiliated him, poisoned him with your cold-hearted pride," she raged. "And now he's fighting for his life. And where are you?" "Off gallivanting in Europe like none of it matters." I swallowed slowly. "You don't get to say that. I gave you everything," she spat. "A marriage. A life. A husband from a good family. And you walked away like some kind of martyr." "No," I said calmly. "I walked away so I wouldn't die quietly the way your son's lies nearly killed me." She hung up. I didn't bother calling back. I stepped out onto the small balcony of my apartment and let the cool wind hit my face. Paris buzzed below. Life continued. And for the first time in so long, I felt no obligation to shrink under someone else's grief. This accident didn't change anything. He was still the man who made me bleed inside a hospital room alone. Still the man who told his mistress I wasn't fresh enough. Still the man who watched me break and stayed silent. I wasn't going back. The next morning I returned to my work table. I poured my energy into my designs. Sleek silhouettes, strong cuts, unapologetic edges. Every stitch felt like a declaration. And as fate would have it, that afternoon he walked in. Not Daniel. Someone else. Well-dressed. Holding a leather portfolio. He stood just inside the boutique where my pieces were displayed, quietly admiring one of my coats. The shop owner, a friend of my professor's, leaned over and whispered, "That's Luca Moreau. He's a textile investor. Based in Florence. Serious connections." I wasn't in the mood. But he turned at that moment and our eyes locked. He smiled. Not like Daniel's practiced charm. But a real one. Simple. Steady. Safe. And for reasons I didn't yet understand, I didn't look away. "Do you mind if I ask about this stitch?" he asked, pointing at the cuff of my wool wrap coat. "It's double top stitched, but cleaner. Sharper." His voice was warm. Curious, not critical. "I altered the tension," I said before I could stop myself. "Just slightly. The thread behaves differently depending on the fabric weight." He raised an eyebrow. "You did that by hand?" "Yes," I said more softly this time. "Everything in this boutique is hand-finished." He didn't say, "Impressive." He didn't nod blankly. He just looked at me like he genuinely saw me. His name was Luca Moreau and everything about him felt like a contrast to Daniel. Where Daniel had been sleek suits and silver tongue, Luca was quiet intelligence and measured calm. He spoke 4 languages but never boasted. He made eye contact without making it a game. And he asked questions about the pieces, the process, the story behind every cut, not to flatter me but because he wanted to understand. By the end of our first conversation, I forgot how guarded I was supposed to be. You don't sell flash, he noted as he tried on one of my tailored blazers. You sell soul. The boutique owner smiled behind the counter. She's been through hell. That's what you're feeling. Luca glanced at me with something I didn't expect, respect. Not pity. Later that week he invited me to coffee. Not dinner. Not drinks. Just coffee. A safe time of day. No pressure. Just two professionals meeting. So I said no. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of wanting anything again. But 2 days later I found myself at the same cafe, sketchbook in hand, when he walked in. He didn't look surprised to see me. Just smiled, sat across from me and said, "You didn't say no to coffee. You said no to the idea of needing someone again." I blinked. "That's what I told myself when I said no to a second marriage," he added. "Turns out I just needed someone who wouldn't make me regret trying again." I tilted my head. "You're divorced." 3 years ago. Her name was Claire. She wanted the world, I wanted peace. We built a beautiful house and filled it with emptiness. I studied him, unsure if it was sympathy I felt or recognition. Maybe both. Over the next few weeks, Luca became inevitable. We didn't rush. We didn't flirt through text or crash into each other's lives like wildfire. We grew slowly, like something planted in the dark, quietly reaching for the light. He came to my studio when I worked late, brought me pastries with names I couldn't pronounce, listened when I ranted about fabric delays and supply chain disasters. And he never once made me feel like I owed him access to the parts of me I hadn't healed yet. One evening as we walked along the Seine, he said something that stopped me cold. "You always pause before you let me get too close." I didn't deny it. He looked at me then softly. "You don't need to be afraid. I won't ask you to shrink for me." That night I told him everything. About Daniel. The betrayal. The abortion. The accident. His mother's call. My shame. My numbness. Even the parts one hadn't said out loud to Harper. He sat silently, elbows on his knees, listening like the world was in my words. When I finished, I waited for the awkwardness, the pity, the polite exit. But all he said was, "Thank you for trusting me." And then softly, "You never needed to earn love. He just didn't know how to give it." The first time Luca kissed me, it wasn't in a bedroom or after some dramatic moment. It was quiet. Intentional. We were walking back from a gallery, rain misting through the street lamps. I was rambling about color palettes when he paused, gently turned me by the shoulders and pressed his forehead against mine. "Stop thinking," he whispered. And then his lips met mine, warm, careful, and unhurried. There was no heat at first. Just calm. Like coming home. From then on, he never let me forget that I mattered. Not for what I could offer. Not for what I'd survived. But just for being exactly who I was now. Not someone's wife. Not someone's widow. Just Avery. One night I got an email from Daniel's assistant. He was awake. Recovering. Stable. He wanted to see me. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked across the small cafe table at Luca, who was watching me quietly over his espresso. "He's asking for me," I said simply. Luca didn't flinch. He reached across the table and gently took my hand. "He can ask. Doesn't mean he gets to have you." I didn't respond to Daniel's request. I didn't need to. Some doors close so completely you can't even hear the knocking anymore. But that didn't stop him from finding me. It happened on a Sunday. Luca and I had just left a quiet brunch spot tucked behind the Palais Royal. He was holding my hand, carrying a box of pastries I insisted I didn't need but would later eat all of. The city felt alive with spring. Flowers blooming from iron balconies, music drifting from the corners of cobbled alleys, and the weight of my past feeling for once distant. Until I heard my name. Avery. One word. One voice. The kind that makes your stomach forget how to exist. I turned. Daniel. Standing across the street, thinner than I remembered. His left arm still in a sling. Bruised. Peeled. But with that same polished watch on his wrist and that same heavy gaze he'd always worn like armor. "I need to talk to you," he said, crossing toward us. Luca's hand in mine tensed. I didn't flinch. There's nothing left to say. Daniel's eyes darted to Luca. "Who is he?" I didn't answer. Luca did. "Someone who knows how to treat her right." Daniel's jaw twitched. "This is between Avery and me." You lost the right to say that the moment you lied, cheated, and called her crazy for wanting honesty. Daniel ignored him, locking eyes with me. I was angry. I made mistakes. But I nearly died. Doesn't that count for something? Accidents aren't apologies, I replied. He stepped forward, voice cracking. Avery, I've changed. I swear to you, I've been in therapy. I've cut everyone off. I was out of my mind when I did what I did. No, I said sharply. You were fully in your mind. That's the problem. His eyes begged. Please. Can we just talk? Luca moved beside me, steady but calm. She said no. Daniel's gaze hardened. You think you know her? I know the version of her that isn't afraid to be herself, Luca replied. The one you tried to shrink into silence. The tension thickened. And then Daniel broke. He dropped his tone, looked straight at me. I loved you. I swallowed. Maybe. In your own broken way. He blinked. But love that destroys isn't love, it's possession. He didn't scream. He didn't argue. He just stood there, wounded pride twisting behind his eyes, and slowly nodded. And then he left. Just like that. No final words. No cinematic ending. Just a man realizing that the woman he thought he could always get back was no longer his to return to. Later, as we sat by the river, I turned to Luca. You didn't have to say anything, I said. I know. But you did. He looked at me, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. I will always stand between you and what hurts you. Even when what hurts you used to be love. My chest tightened. I'm not afraid anymore, I whispered. I know, he said. But I'll still be here just in case. That night, as he kissed my shoulder under the soft light of my apartment, I realized something. Daniel made me question my worth. But Luca made me remember it. Paris bloomed around us. Not just in the flower boxes on the windowsills or the vines crawling up ancient stone walls, but in the way I felt when Luca touched my back gently in a crowded gallery, or the way he listened when I explained the inspiration behind a sketch he'd never even seen. We were building something. Not a love that demanded proof. Not a fire that burned everything down. But something strong. Warm. Steady. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being known completely. One afternoon, I came home to find a note slipped beneath my apartment door. Just a name and a location. Daniel. Jardin du Luxembourg. 4 p.m. One last thing. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But a deeper part, the one that had once wanted answers, whispered, go. Just once more. End it properly. Luca didn't try to stop me when I told him. He just nodded. If it's the final page, then close it. I'll be here when you're done. Daniel was already sitting on a bench when I arrived. The garden was quiet, dappled sunlight flickering through branches. He looked smaller somehow. Softer. No suit, no watch. Just a man with nothing left to prove. He stood as I approached and held out a plain envelope. My lawyer's copy, he said. Signed. Stamped. Finalized. I took it without a word. I'm not here to beg anymore, he added. I just wanted to hand this over myself. I owed you that much. I glanced at him. Why now? Because when I saw you walk away that day, with him, I realized I was never going to be the man you deserved. You didn't need me broken. And I didn't know how to be whole. I nodded. You were right. You didn't. We stood in silence for a long moment. Then he said, you were the best part of my life. I just didn't know how to hold you without crushing you. I hope you figure out how to be better for someone else, I said. But not for me. He smiled faintly. No bitterness this time. Just a quiet understanding. Take care of yourself, Avery. You too, Daniel. As I walked away from him, the envelope tucked under my arm, I didn't look back. Not once. Because this time I didn't need to. Closure wasn't about the other person. It was about finally recognizing you no longer needed anything from them. Not love, not apology, not explanation. Just distance. That evening, Luca invited me to a private dinner on the rooftop of the boutique where my debut line had first launched. The city stretched out beneath us, gold, glittering, full of noise and beauty. I have something for you, he said softly. I already have everything, I whispered, smiling. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. But before he opened it, he looked at me, eyes steady, voice firm. I don't want to complete you, he said. You're already whole. I just want to walk beside you, through your art, your fire, your silence, your joy. He opened the box. Inside, a gold ring with a small diamond nestled beside a sapphire. Elegant, quiet, strong. Marry me, he said. Not because you need to, but because you want to build something that's ours. My breath caught, and I nodded. Not because I needed a new name or a new future to erase the old, but because for the first time in my life, love didn't feel like a cage. Felt like a key. I didn't rush to announce the engagement. There were no fireworks on social media, no clinking champagne flutes surrounded by a chorus of congratulations. There was just me staring at the ring on my finger, and the quiet certainty that this time, I hadn't said yes out of fear, pressure, or the need to be chosen. I had chosen myself first, and then I chose Luca. We planned the wedding slowly. No grand venues. No massive guest lists. No choreographed dances or designer label pageantry. Just 30 of the people who mattered most, a sun-drenched vineyard in the hills of Provence, and vows that didn't promise perfection. Only truth, effort, and presence. Harper, of course, cried before I even walked down the aisle. You're marrying a man who actually has a soul, she sniffed. I'm so proud of you. Also, please let me steal your florist. My mother stood quietly beside me as I adjusted my veil, her fingers trembling ever so slightly as she tucked in a loose strand of hair. I stayed too long in the wrong story, she whispered. But you rewrote the ending. I looked at her in the mirror and smiled. I didn't rewrite it, Mom. I just picked up the pen. The ceremony was held just before golden hour. I walked through rows of lavender and wildflowers, the scent of the earth fresh beneath my feet. I wore a gown I designed myself, off-white silk, clean lines, a bare back, and a train that moved like water behind me. Luca stood at the altar, not in a tuxedo, but in a charcoal gray suit that made his eyes look almost stormy. When he saw me, he smiled. Not the kind of smile that tries to charm or impress. The kind that says, I've been waiting my whole life to find you. Our vows were unscripted. When it was my turn, I looked at him and said, I used to think love was about being enough for someone else. Now I know it's about being brave enough to be yourself. With someone who doesn't flinch. You never asked me to dim or fold or make myself smaller. You didn't save me. You stood beside me. And because of that, I finally saved myself. His eyes misted, but he didn't blink them away. When it was his turn, he said, I don't want to be your rescue. I want to be your anchor when the world spins too fast, your mirror when you forget how brilliant you are, and your safe place when everything else feels loud. I love you, Avery. Not in spite of your scars. Because of them. We kissed under a sky that glowed with the last light of day. And just like that, I became Avery Morrow. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to build something that had nothing to do with survival, and everything to do with choice. Later that night, as we slow danced barefoot under fairy lights, I whispered to him, I never thought I'd feel safe again. Not like this. Luca pressed a kiss to my temple. That's what happens when love stops being a storm, and becomes a shelter. Daniel didn't come. There was no last-minute intrusion. No apology letters. No specter of the past dragging behind me in white satin. His final message had been the signed divorce papers. And with them, every chain broke clean. I had thanked him silently, not for the pain, but for giving me every reason to leave. Because if he hadn't betrayed me, I never would have found this life. This version of me. This kind of love. When the night grew late, Harper toasted us. To the girl who once burned a rose garden, she said, glass held high, and built a whole damn life from the ashes. Laughter erupted. My mother cried again. Lucas squeezed my hand beneath the table. And I smiled, truly, deeply for the first time in years. Because this wasn't a happy ending. This was a whole new beginning. And this time the story was mine. The end.